Good afternoon. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for December 20th, 2022. It is now 1:31 p.m. and this will be our last meeting of this calendar year. Welcome to all. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? If not, might I have a motion, please, that council approve the agenda for today's meeting as presented? Councillor Melnick, thank you. All in favor? None opposed? That is carried. We have 3 sets of minutes for approval today, beginning with Legislative Committee meeting minutes of December 6th. Apart from those who sit on that committee, I doubt that anybody has noted any errors or omissions with respect to those minutes. And as Deputy Mayor Hall is the only other one present who is a member of that committee, would you like to make a motion? Okay, I have a motion from Councillor Hall that council approve the minutes of the December 6th, 2022 Legislative Committee as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. We have the regular meeting minutes of December 6th, 2022. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Councillor Waxer?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Waxer that council approve the minutes of the December 6th, 2022 regular council meeting as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. And finally, we have the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of December 13, 2022. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Not, I look for a motion. Councillor Keller-Rempe, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. Agenda item 4, correspondence. We have nothing on the agenda. Agenda item 5, delegations. Again, nothing on the agenda and no one else in the room to speak to us as a delegation, which takes us to agenda item 6. New business, Jasper Municipal Library Board appointments. And is that being presented by our representative on that committee or?
My understanding as chair of the HR committee is that there were 3 applicants for 3 positions. So it did not come to the HR committee for approval unless we had concerns here. And I don't, so I will make a motion and then we can leave it up for debate. That council appoint the following individuals to the Jasper Municipal Library Board: Joyce Milnick, Lorena Alonso, and Sean Carter, for a term commencing January 1, 2023 and concluding December 31st, 2025.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Is there any debate or questions about the motion or the appointments? If not, as we heard, 3 applications for 3 positions. That works. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried, and we will get letters sent to those individuals indicating that their appointments commence on January 1st, 2023. Agenda item 2, or pardon me, 6.2, procedural bylaw number 190. Again, Mr. Given, did you wish to present that, or the chair of the legislative committee?
Your worship, I can do a very brief introduction. This is just a continuance of the suspension of the portion of the procedure bylaw that laid out the format of the council and committee of the whole agendas. So the structure of the agendas and the order of items. Council previously suspended those rules, as you're allowed to do under the procedure bylaw, so we can test a different agenda layout. I think that that's been going fairly well, and I think the recommendation from the committee is that that should continue until the overall review of procedure bylaw 190 is done in the new year. So this is just a continuance of the that allows administration to continue presenting the agenda in the order that you see it in front of you today.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any questions for administration regarding the recommendation? If there are none, I'd like to call upon Deputy Mayor Ball to make that motion as chair of the legislative committee.
Yes, you may. I move that council approve the suspension of section 1.3 and schedule 2 of the procedure bylaw until the completion of the procedure bylaw update pursuant of section 3.4 of the existing bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Is there any debate on that question, on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Takes us to agenda item 6.3, reserves policy, which was before us as committee of the whole a week ago. Some changes were made. The revised policy and schedule is available. Mr. Given, I presume there's minimal reporting required on your behalf.
Yes, your worship, minimal reporting. The inclusion of the definition of tangible capital assets has been included, and I think the other more significant changes were to the public transportation reserve, which is now public transportation parking reserve. There was also under the contribution formula for that reserve that now added parking, the line of up to 100% of any payments in lieu of parking should be contributed to the reserve. As discussed at the committee of the whole meeting last week, that means that when administration receives a payment in lieu of parking, we'll bring that information to the council to decide how much to contribute to the reserve. Your worship, I think that those are all the material changes. There are some other minor ones, such as removing the maximum, the word maximum from the affordable housing reserve, and a couple of other more minor ones that don't come to mind, but this reflects all the changes that were put forward by committee of the whole last week.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any further questions of administration? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Given. When we talk about revenues, are we talking about gross revenues or net revenues?
Your worship, for Councillor Melnick, if we are talking about the proposed public transportation and parking reserve, the discussion of revenues, there's only 2 areas where it talks about revenues. Around paid parking revenue from the prior year. That would be after expenses, so that would be net revenue. And similarly, the final point around any potential quote unquote profit that might be generated from public transportation activities would be after expenses. So again, net.
Thank you for that. And I have one other quick question about the twice annual reporting that was suggested. Are we tied to any particular months? In other words, for the reporting to be effective, to be twice, it potentially should be after 4 months and maybe after 8 months, which is the twice reporting. If it's in June, then effectively the second report isn't really going to help council.
Your worship, I think for Councillor Melnick, I think administration's intent would be that council would receive at least one report in advance or as a part of budget discussions. That would be one report on reserve balances. You would see, what the current reserve balances are and what administration is recommending for use of the reserves in the upcoming year. So that would be one report. The other would be along with one of our quarterly financial reports that the Director of Finance Administration presents. I suspect that would likely be the minimum of reporting the council would receive. I think once we've built that into the quarterly financial reports, it's probably something that Director Malachek will just update and present each time she does it. But again, it does fill out what the minimum expectation for reporting is.
Thank you for that. Through you, your worship. I think that speaks to the spirit of what my question was about, is that, more frequent is better than less frequent.
Thank you for that, Councillor Miller. Any other questions for administration? Mr. Gibbon, I have one, and I apologize for not having raised this at an earlier occasion, but can you just explain the meaning of a phrase that appears 3 times in the schedule? So it's for the fixed asset reserve, the fleet reserve, and the utility capital reserve. All of them say 1 2-year capital renewal. What exactly is that meant to imply? It ties back to the asset management study from 2015, but it's just awkward wording, 1 2-year renewal.
Yeah, your worship. So the 2015 study recommended that municipalities should be putting away approximately $1.67 million a year. That would be 1 year. And if I double that, I would get 2 years worth, which would be 3.34 million. And so I think it is awkward wording, but the thing in the brackets is explaining in words what the numbers in front of the brackets show. So it is, from another way to say it, would be the target balance is equal to the target balance shall be between 1 and 2 years of capital renewal as recommended, right? And so 1 year of capital renewal would be the $1.67 million. 2 years of capital renewal would be $3.34 million. So it is. I agree. I think that is maybe awkwardly worded. But so 1 year, 1.67, which you can see looking at the utility capital reserve, and 2 year. So 1 to 2 years annual capital renewals for the recommendations of the study.
Well, thank you for that. And just on the off chance that members of the public do read our policies and the schedules, I think it's important that they understand what that means. And just for clarity, then, that asset management study from 2015 proposed an amount that we ought to be setting aside to replace listed assets over the lifetime of the asset. So there's no implication there that we could renew all those assets in a 2-year period, but that is the amount over a 1 or 2 year period that should be set aside to replace those assets over the life of the assets.
Your worship, that's correct.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for Mr. Gibbon regarding the reserve policy B112 or the schedule which is attached? If not, I would look for a motion from a councillor. Councillor Wilson.
I would make a motion that council approve the reserves policy B112 and Schedule A reserves description as presented.
Is there any debate on that motion? I will call a question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.4, again, a matter that we considered last week at committee of the whole. And that is the all hazards incident management team agreement with Northwest Alberta Emergency Resource Agreement. Mr. Gibbon?
Your Worship, across the province, there are a number of all hazard incident management teams. They're essentially collections of municipalities that have pre-arrangements on how to work together on emergency response, really disaster response or significant events. The municipality of Jasper would typically be in the central zone that continues all the way into Edmonton and Strathcona County. But because these are typically, because these teams would typically be drawn into service around disaster response or significant threats, administration discussed with the Alberta Emergency Management Agency whether that central zone teaming was the right one for us to fit with, given the nature of their risk, particularly the majority of the members in the capital region is not the same sort of nature that we have here, which is largely wildfire. The Northwest All Hazard Incident Management Team has a significant amount of experience. Our administrative teams and our fire chief have been working closely with a number of their members. Who, as I said, have a whole lot of experience with similar types of hazards. So administration is recommending that council approve joining the Northwest All Hazard Incident Management Team. The agreement that you see in front of you essentially spells out the agreements between the parties, and should any party, how parties would request support from other municipalities in the case of a response, and what the and a rate sheet of what costs of response would be. These also are the costs that we would be able to charge for our equipment should we assist any of the other partners in disaster response. As you see, there are a number of municipalities in the Northwest that are already party to this agreement, and the recommendation coming from committee was the council approve the all Northwest all hazard incident management team agreement as presented so far.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Any questions regarding this matter? Councillor Waxer?
Not a question, but I'm willing to make the motion. Recommendation that council enter into the Northwest Alberta Emergency Resource Agreement as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Is there any debate on the motion? Mr. Gibbon, I want to raise, and not speaking against the motion, because I am in favor of it and it makes sense that we do this, but having dug into Appendix B, I am left with some questions, and it might be worth assuming that we join this collection of communities, that somebody addresses exactly what we mean for cost recovery in some places. So my concerns are item 6 on the rate schedule, personal career cost recovery. I don't know what that would be based on. I assume that our personnel who are career individuals, like our fire chief, get a salary. So how do you manage cost recovery based on that? Like, it's not wages. Other ones are kind of wage related. So it just downstream at some point it may become an issue. Similarly, under 10, I struggle to figure out whether there are 2 12-hour days and a 24-hour day. So there's a maximum rate per 12-hour day, which is the hourly rate. But can it get charged twice in a 24-hour day? I don't know what that description is supposed to mean.
Your Worship, I'm probably not the best to speak to this. Chief Conte likely would be, or Director Nadon. I think you are correct on the number 6, career personnel. Maybe I would do that in a different direction, but career personnel are those that have ongoing regular employment in a fire service as their only source of employment, which may mean also in other areas where there would be unionized firefighters or full-time firefighters. And so that's what that personal career. In cases like this, where a municipality, a partner municipality responds and assists the municipality that allows their staff to go to respond, would be able to claim back, or to bill out the amount of salary, probably a prorated amount that would have been due to that individual for that period of time. And so I think that's the approach that they'd have in a personal career. Consumables, again, pretty straightforward. Keep your receipts and be able to demonstrate that. And then with respect to the maximum hours a day, I don't believe a single type 1 or type 2 engine, for example, could be billed out for 2 12-hour days in one 24-hour period. I think it is maximum 12 hours of operation in one day. But again, that's something we could follow up with Chief Conte. I would make a note that our ability to adjust this, any adjustments to Schedule B or any other part of the agreement would require approval and sign off of every other one of the municipalities. So there may be some things in there that could use some adjusting. And the complication of adjusting them means as long as the fire chiefs are comfortable with it and know how to apply it. And my understanding is that and knowing that other communities in the Northwest have been party to this for quite some time, and it has been utilized many times. And I think the fire professionals are very comfortable with applying this the way that's working.
I appreciate all of that, and as I indicated, it's not grounds to have me vote against the motion. I think it's the right motion, but I just raise it. And as you say, if it's going to be administered by fire chief, I would just like him to be comfortable before something happens, before we either request assistance or respond to a request for assistance, that we know what the terms are. Is there any other debate or questions related to entering into this particular agreement? If not, we have the motion from Councillor Waxer, and I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Which takes us to agenda item 6.5, commercial use of public space, patio seating. Mr. Gibbon.
Your Worship, we have a recommendation again that was discussed at Committee of the Whole last week. So I'll be very brief. This is a recommendation that's coming from the Commercial Use of Public Space Task Force that Council struck earlier this year. The task force included representatives of the Chamber of Commerce, Tourism Jasper, and 2 council members, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Mota. The task force met a number of times to discuss the issue of commercial use of public space, more specifically patio seating. They discussed a number of different views of patio seating and its impact both on businesses, on locals, general public, and other visitors to the community who may or may not be using patio seating. They looked at other comparable communities that they believed would be good comparators, and they engaged in a couple of workshops to identify what they saw as the do's and don'ts of patio seating. They have, from their discussions, developed the proposed standard, which you see attached in the, just make sure that it's actually in the council package. It is in the council package. Attached in the council package, you'll see the proposed standard that the committee has, or the task force has recommended. As discussed last week, some of these are really recommendations to municipal administration on how to administer the program, while others are standards about the physical installation of patios. And so this is in front of council for council's consideration. If council wish to vary the proposed standard in any way, then my suggestion would be that you would have motions to vary that particular clause. So move that council amend the proposed standard by changing term whatever to blank, whatever council wish to do. For ones that are sort of administrative in nature in terms of how we apply the program. For example, one of the additional considerations is that the municipality should develop a set of template designs, meeting all required criteria for use of the businesses. Council doesn't need to make any particular action unless you think that we absolutely must do that. You want to be very clear that it's not just a should, it's administration shall develop a set of templates. You can give us that direction. If council is really dislikes an idea, then you could move to have it removed from the proposed standard. So I think I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions. I know that Councillor Wilson, as a member of the task force, can also speak to any of the items that may come up.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gibbon. Any further questions for administration? Councillor Keller-Hemby.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to either Councillor Wilson or Mr. Gibbon. I had a few phone calls this weekend regarding the patio blocks, the removal of them, and I got asked an interesting question. Were there stats presented on accidents regarding outdoor seating? Was there any type of stats that was looked at for outdoor seating in different areas, and if there was accidents?
Your worship, I can handle that. The committee didn't request, nor were there any stats presented on collisions in Jasper or in any other jurisdiction. I can say anecdotally that I'm aware of, I think, 3 situations where there was a reportable accident. One was in an installation that did not have any jersey barriers. It was an installation that was mostly made out of wood. It was, I think, backed into rather than sort of oncoming. And there was a bump and there was no damage, no injury. Another was a situation where there was one that did have jersey barriers, where a semi truck doing deliveries, trying to back in around the corner, backed in to a location. And I think there may have been another one on Patricia Street where a vehicle went into, it was where there's a wooden walk around installation, and a vehicle that was parked went into the curb stop. So in that installation, there were curbs down. There aren't jersey barriers, but they're curb stops. And those are the only ones that I'm anecdotally aware of.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Just the conversations that I was having was around safety. And I think a lot of people are concerned about jersey barriers being removed because of the safety issue.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hemby. Councillor Wilson.
I guess just question to administration, if we've heard from any members of the public or businesses that are not part of the JPCC or Tourism Jasper.
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson, I'll say that I haven't heard anything directly, and I've looked at our committee assistant, and she's telling me that she also hasn't received anything through the info or regular channels of communication. So no, we haven't had any input on this in either direction.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, it just came up. Just to speak further to the jersey barriers, the committee, or sorry, the task force attempt at deflecting traffic, errant traffic coming from the driving direction was the jersey barrier / planter, and those planters that we have suggested using would serve the same purpose as a jersey barrier, although it doesn't, of course, keep cars from veering into the patio, but it neither does the sidewalk. And so I think same type of, we're kind of looking at the same type of risk there.
Councillor Waxer?
I think my comments are the same as that, which is why I didn't vote yes last week. I'm very enthusiastic about the patios. I think they add a lot to the community, but I had some real concern about the lack of the Jersey berries, but I can see also your point that it's pretty much the same as a sidewalk where there's no barriers protecting you there either. I'm giving it lots of thought.
If I may, on that same point, I appreciate the argument, but on the other hand, typically between curbside and traffic lane, there are parked vehicles, and at least if they're not parked, there's an empty lane. So it is different in the sense that vehicles are passing by within very close proximity to pedestrians. So it's a little different than the sidewalk scenario, I think. I will speak, and I may relinquish the chair soon to make a motion, but I share with Councillor Waxer enthusiasm for the patios. I think they have been wonderful for the town, and I want to see them continue, and I am well aware that the business sector needs certainty, and the sooner the better, so they can prepare for the coming summer. Apart from the question of Jersey barriers, and there I think we should consider that word should. In that particular context, I find that to be nebulous at best. We could say either that the municipality shall or may, but should leaves it, I think, more uncertain. But I have a question or a concern regarding both materials and umbrellas. And although I appreciate that we appointed a task force and they did good work, and I most appreciate that. It relieved council of some of the strain of this work. But I find the materials and the umbrellas to be overly prescriptive. I do understand that some standards are important, but a color is not a standard. It's just a color, and it's very prescriptive. I appreciate that we don't want patios to be regarded as trashy or tacky. But I'm not convinced that total uniformity is required either. If black is acceptable, and there are some places that had black umbrellas and they look good, but in a national park community, forest green might be appropriate. Blue matching the Alberta sky might be appropriate. To limit it to one color seems to me to be, as I said, overly prescriptive. Similarly with wood or painted metal, there are many people now building decks and patios for themselves out of synthetic wood. They look like the real thing. They last much better. Why would we not be prepared to encourage people to conserve resources by building with something other than wood or painted metal? And it just seems to me that in a recommendation that we want to, or are required to bring forward to Parks Canada, we should look at a principles-based approach, not a prescriptive approach, saying umbrellas can only be black. And I appreciate that it says or consistent with approved building colors, but I think any building owner would struggle to find where they have approval for a building color, even if it's a color of the building. I don't know that any approvals have ever actually been issued, and who is going to bear the burden of showing what was approved or not approved. We have buildings that predate 1968 when the first regulations came in, so there will be no approved building colors. So it is a color, it's black or nothing. And I will say, it seems to me to be inconsistent with what we see happening in the world. Even in the architectural motif guidelines, there is wording that indicates that accessories, if that's the right word, might be brighter than the building. Doors and window frames to add accent. And I would think that umbrellas might be the same. And further, from my perspective, Parks Canada had an absolutely tremendous success with the Red Chair program. So dotting the landscape outside of the town site are red plastic chairs. And red plastic is good on the landscape, apparently. And I don't think anybody complained that we would lose our status as a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of it. But in the town, we can't have, apparently, anything that's bright and attractive. We can only have black. And I appreciate these are not Parks Canada's regulations. These are recommendations, but I understand, I think, why the recommendation is as it is, because it's most likely to be accepted. But those red chairs are welcoming and enticing. People are drawn to them. More so than were they black chairs out on the landscape. So I think it needs some reflection. And I would think that we would do ourselves and our community a service if we could find a way to recognize that standards are important, but that there should be guidelines, not prescriptions. I have struggled to come up with a motion that encompasses all of that. But I would welcome some discussion at this table to see where we might go with it. Councillor Wilson.
There's a lot in there that I agree with for sure. I'm not sure which one to jump on first, though, to I guess discuss why the task force went that direction. But I guess we could start with colors. We were tasked with coming up with some type of guidelines, and we didn't want to leave it vague, because if it's vague, then Parks Canada will make that decision. We struggled with colors for sure. And I think, not to speak on behalf of the other members of the task force, but I think they could get behind any color. Yet we were trying to have some type of uniformity and show that we're not advocating for a no holds barred patio scene. So we kind of went towards some type of parameters. I think if you were able to fashion a motion that suggests that some type of colors are acceptable, neon pink, probably try to exclude those ones. You know, I would vote in favor of it, and with the I would think it would have the support of the task force as well. But we didn't want this to be tacky. There are many tacky materials out there, and a lot of them are plastic. Composite woods are a different scenario, and I feel bad that I didn't bring that up, because I have worked with a lot of those products, and so if you can fashion a motion that includes composite wood grain materials, I think we can get behind that as well. The metal railings, that material is pretty standard. you could make that same stuff out of composite wood, but I think that there should be some uniformity to. Are you laughing over there, Ralph? No, it's not.
We're good.
Okay. You threw me off now. We, as a task force, thought about building materials and access to building materials, and what you would most likely be using, and you'd most likely be using black metal handrail that you would use as a guard or a staircase guard, something that you could easily order at the local hardware. There's, if we can work in composite building material, yes. The reason we have in there wood should be stained or brown pressure treated. Again, we didn't want that green pressure treated material whereas that does look bad. We didn't want raw 2x4s, and people may use that if it wasn't defined. So there has to be some parameters to it. And I think that kind of shows in the colors as well. I think we would definitely support colors that resemble the buildings or the businesses branding. Yet we had to come up with some parameters. So again, I hope that you really push the chair and have a motion that you've been working on over there.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. As I say, I have been working on it, but I don't have one yet. But it's challenging, but I welcome the discussion. I appreciate that we also don't want it to be too open-ended or too discretionary. I look at our cemetery bylaw, which will be back, I think, before us as well. But there, as described in that bylaw, the municipal manager, who is the CAO now, in my view, has discretion to allow things or prohibit things that are unsightly, distasteful, or unsuitable. And so if we had wording, I might suggest for both materials and umbrellas that in each case, the applicant would have to seek approval, and there was a mechanism to allow a person, whether the CAO or someone else in the system, to disapprove on the basis that something was distasteful or trashy or tacky or shambly, as our director of Culture and Recreation once said. Maybe, I could certainly support that. It puts a lot of pressure on an individual, but I would also support an appeal from any decision directly to council. Because at the end of the day, the buck has to stop somewhere, and if I'm going to raise it, then I would be prepared to have it come back to council, so that there is an opportunity to consider both the uniqueness of every business and the fact that black is not the only color that could be classy, not trashy, but still to have some control of things getting out of hand and harming the reputation of the entire community and possibly the national park. Councillor Wilson.
Well, just give you a little bit more time. This is a question to Mr. Gibbon, because I thought we did discuss a little bit of it. What we don't have in here, and is spacing between materials and size of materials. We have maximum height and maximum and minimum height, but not spacing. And I think we don't have that because we didn't want to be too over prescriptive. We didn't want to suggest that vertical, it could only be vertical spindles and horizontal railings. I think we discussed the fact that if somebody wanted to do a nice horizontal railing as kind of depicted in the original Parks Canada architectural drawings, or sorry, not drawings, architectural drawings, but renderings, that they could do so. And I think that's why we put it in there that the MOJ should develop a set of template designs meeting all required criteria for the use of businesses. So to give people the idea of what we're expecting. But anyway, that is off to Mr. Given to kind of comment on that.
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson, specifically on the style of preventing anybody from entering into the driving lane. That is under, the committee did consider that, as you remember correctly, and had a line in there under additional considerations. Parking lane installations must have wood or metal barriers parallel to the driving lane in a way that prevents children from accessing the way. So it does allow for that variety, and I think that that's what there is here, is that there's a discussion about to what extent the municipality allows for choice and variety, and to what extent the municipality provides operators with certainty about whether their design will be approved or not. And I think in that area, the committee said, you need to have some kind of barrier that prevents children from accessing the roadway. But there's a number of different ways that you can do that. And so we're not going to specify exactly which. So that, absolutely was a discussion there. I think the committee took that somewhat balanced approach that said there's a priority here about ensuring that there's some sort of barrier, that you have some sort of railing there, and we're not going to tell you exactly how to do it. I think there was also some discussion about maybe tempered glass could be an option as well. So there's a variety of different ways to meet that same sort of design intent.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was in this discussion about colors and materials and so on. I was looking at past council minutes just to refresh my memory about what the approved building colors were. Because I think there was some variety in the colors that perhaps should be extended to the umbrellas where, it must be black, but we don't talk about the approved building colors specifically, leaving that to Parks Canada. There's no reference to the actual colors that are approved. And I see that the next steps here will be for this to be presented to by administration, presented to Parks Canada for consideration. Pardon me, as we will have to get that special permit again or authorization, or is that I'm looking at the colors that maybe should be included here, and then also how that relates to the next steps.
Your worship, for Councillor Melnick, so I don't believe that there's additional special permitting that needs to be approved. I think that there is some, it's a complicated matter because, if there are building permit issues and development permit issues, development permit is really around use, and is this appropriate use? I think that matters to be settled. if somebody goes and does something that starts to get into building code issues, then they've decided to get themselves into building permit issues, which are exclusively the parks jurisdiction. I think the gray area that the committee was trying to navigate is, I think with respect to motif, where parks may have a view, unfortunately, there is not enough clarity to understand when parks will have a view. And I think the committee is trying to establish some certainty for business operators, parks, and municipal administration in its recommendations, and saying, well, if there is a color that currently exists in the retail environment where a patio would also exist, then that color should be allowed. Right, because it provides some scope of certainty. If there's some color that somebody decides that they want to use that doesn't exist already on Connaught Drive, or particularly in the building that they're going to be in front of, then it would not be allowed. So again, I think that was the committee's attempt to provide for some variety, for some choice on behalf of the businesses, while also providing some constraints to ensure that it wasn't, that Parks Canada, municipality and business operators would know that, hey, if it's on your building, the committee's recommendations certainly support that. If you decide to pick some color that is not anywhere on your building or on your signage or whatever else, then that is not something the committee's recommending. So it is still a bit nebulous, but at least it is not subjective. Right? Like, is that color on the building? Yes, it is. Okay, then we think it's fine. Is that color somewhere else out in nature? Maybe, but is it on the building? No. Well, then that would not be that would not be within the standard. So it is a bit of a challenge, but trying to reduce the subjectivity.
If I may, we've only been at it for less than an hour. But if I could call a 5-minute recess, I might configure a motion. And it does come down, as Mr. Gibbon just indicated, ultimately to the value of certainty over discretion. But I have not yet configured my own mind around it. But let us recess until 2:30, and I will try and configure a motion. Thank you. All right, we are back a couple of minutes late. I apologize. I've had more trouble configuring my motion than I thought. However, I will relinquish the chair to Deputy Mayor Hall and make one motion to cover both items that leave me perplexed. So I would move that the recommendation with respect to materials be amended to read wood or painted metal or other material approved upon application to council sitting as committee of the whole, which may prohibit any material which in their opinion they consider to be unsightly, distasteful, or unsuitable. And with respect to umbrellas, umbrellas must be black in color, consistent with approved building colors, or of other color approved by council sitting as committee of the whole, which may prohibit any color which in their opinion is considered to be unsightly, distasteful, or unsuitable. That is my motion. And speaking to it, I have attempted to provide an avenue of certainty for the business sector, following the recommendation that we received from the task force. So if the recommendations were to have been approved as they are written, then for materials, wood or painted metal, as long as the wood be stained brown or stained or brown pressure treated, they could go ahead. Similarly, if they desire to have certainty and want black umbrellas or a color consistent with approved building colors, they could do that. If they really want something else, and knowing that discretion is a slippery slope, they could come to council. I had thought of others where we might send them, but it is clear that our own administrative personnel would not welcome the exercise of that discretion, and I can hardly throw it back on Parks Canada. So council may not be prepared to have it here, but I would be prepared to have it here. So that is my motion to change the recommendation. For clarity, I added words after wood or painted metal. And I would stop there, but I would leave the rest of that sentence or those lines in there, so that wood should be stained or brown pressure treated and metal shall be painted black or consistent with approved building colors. I had no intent to change that, simply to add to both the wording for materials and umbrellas. And that is my motion to change the proposed standard recommendation in those two particulars.
Thank you for your motion. I believe Councillor Wilson, you had your hand up. We'll go to Councillor Waxer.
I have two questions. Is black an approved building color? And if so, why are we mentioning it specifically? And now I've forgotten the second question. Oh, yes, I know. When we speak of approved building colors, do we mean the building to which you are attached, or any of the Parks Canada approved building colors? Because it isn't clear to me if we're talking about the building that you're in front of, or going back to the approved building palette. And I'm not sure who that question is for.
Well, I didn't configure the original proposed standards. I had assumed, perhaps incorrectly, that the reference to approved building colors meant the building in respect to which the patio is attached. But you're right, I don't know. Councillor Wilson might be able to speak to that as having sat on the committee. And I would hesitate to say whether black is an approved building color. I mean, there are black aspects of some buildings. It's not likely to have a black building.
Councillor Waxer.
Just to counter that, when I was reading it, I assumed approved building colors was the Parks Canada's color palette. So just to point out that there may be different interpretations of the same words.
Councillor Wilson.
I think a lot of this, a lot of these challenges come from the fact that I don't think that the architectural motif actually has a color palette. It suggests certain shades, earth tones, etc. But I'm almost positive, I'm looking at Mr. Given, that there is not a palette. Those would be ideal if there was a palette that we could say, boom, boom, that's what it is.
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson, no, my understanding is that the motif does not specify specific colors or palette of colors. I think it talks about natural or muted colors, which again is somewhat subjective, well, quite subjective, and there's a range of things that could fit into that, present some of the challenge.
Councillor Wilson?
Not to speak further to that, just I am not in support of the motion as it's worded. That I don't feel that proponents could come to council with any suggestion of building material. I think we can suggest metal, stained wood, ground pressure treated, or composite wood. The composite wood would resemble wood in all the same similarities. What we don't allow, or what Parks Canada does allow, is people to build with vinyl siding. But it's a great product. It does. It serves a purpose in other places, but it doesn't. It's not approved here. I don't think we need to be sitting here at the council or at the committee of the whole table and 7 of us saying yes or no to certain products. I'm not in support of that. Colors, maybe, yet I think we could somehow get a color palette that we think is appropriate and pass that off to Parks Canada.
Any other comments or questions from council? There is a motion on the table. Are you perhaps suggesting some amendments? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall, and through you to Mayor Ireland. Reflecting on Councillor Wilson's comments about the color palettes and, 7 of us deciding whether that color palette or perhaps maybe a composite wood material might be more appropriate than wood. It is interesting to have that come back to council where I don't know if we have that expertise to be able to do that. And it would always be, I guess, up to or to be final approval. I would suggest if we're out of line, perhaps with Parks Canada, if we do make a color decision that we think, there still will be another, I think, authority that will probably weigh into it. So just understanding what we're talking about here, that while we may be deciding on what we think, there may be one more level that I perceive could have a say in what we're deciding.
Any other comments or questions or amendments or anything from council? I see no hands.
Oh, question.
But there is a motion. Did you want to close? Okay.
I do wish to close. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. I appreciate the difficulty and I appreciate sort of the irony of the situation to take discretion and send it back to council. But my concern is if we were making a recommendation to ourselves, not to a third party, is this what I would recommend we do? Fixate on one color or potentially some other approved colors either on a specific building or within a color palette that we don't understand. Is if this was our bylaw, is this what I would be in favor of? And I think not. I would prefer to take the time to have something based more in principle, recognizing the conflicting needs of variety and diversity and the avoidance of a free-for-all and a tacky mess. But I don't think we have to take just one color to avoid tackiness. I think that's overreach. But if we were doing this ourselves, as I say, this is not something that I would support. So why should I support sending this to Parks Canada or having it apply to our community generally? So I struggle, but I'm recognizing as well that this has been dragging on for a number of years, and those who choose to have patios need some certainty. My hope was that we could confirm whatever certainty is in this document, but still leave something open. Over time, perhaps we could build exactly what Councillor Wilson was suggesting, our own color palette or something, but until we have some authority to do so, we're spinning our wheels there. So it's difficult, and I can fully understand that it maybe will be seen as making things worse and more uncertain than better. And so I leave it there, but I struggle to see how I would respond if I was the recipient of the recommendation that we're being asked to send to somebody else.
I know they were closing remarks, but I see Councillor Waxer might want to weigh in.
I had a distinct memory that there was a color palette from Parks Canada, and I went back through my emails and have found that there is in fact a color palette.
Does that change any? The motion is still there. What are the color? What are the colors? Okay. Okay, we do have a question on the table, and I feel like we've all spoken. Councillor Wilson, you're good? Okay. Are you want to?
Well, Councillor Wilson was concerned about council's ability to deal with materials. It would be easy enough to split the questions if that's what he wanted to do.
Thanks for the suggestion.
Would you like to reword? Was it two motions made into one? Do you want us? We'll separate them. Is that?
If there's a request to do that.
Yes, please.
Great. Mayor Ireland, would you be able to read out the first part of the motion one more time?
With respect to the proposed standards that are before us, my motion is to amend that section dealing with materials as follows. Wood or painted metal or other material approved by council sitting as committee of the whole, which may prohibit any material which in its opinion is considered to be unsightly, distasteful, or unsuitable. And then that section would continue, wood should be stained or ground pressure treated. Metal should be painted black or consistent with approved building colors.
Okay, thank you for the motion. Any further debate? There is. Administration has the motion. Okay. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? There's one opposed, and that motion is carried. Mayor Allen, would you please read out your second part of the motion?
With respect to the section on umbrellas, I would amend it or move that it be amended to read umbrellas must be black in color, comma, consistent with approved building colors or of other color approved by council sitting as committee of the whole, which may prohibit any color which in its opinion is considered to be unsightly, distasteful, or unsuitable.
Thank
And I
you.
would leave that section, single colored logos allowed. We haven't discussed that.
Thank you for your motion. I will call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed, and that is carried. And now I will hand the chair floor back to Mayor Ireland. Okay, I won't quite yet.
Yeah. Before you do that, I have another motion I'd like to present. And in this case, my motion is that the proposed standards be amended by replacing the word should where it appears with respect to both Jersey barriers and under additional considerations dealing with a set of template designs. In each of those cases, my motion would be to replace the word should with the word may. And that the intent of that is, and perhaps they are the same, but may or may not. Should is more compelling. It's not as heavy as shall, but they should. You should be doing that. The community could say, but I'm not sure that the municipality should be developing a set of template designs. It may, if it chooses, do that, but should it be doing that? That to me seems a step too far right now. Or alternatively, we could just remove those two items. I'm not sure that we should commit to using flower planters as barriers. But we could do that if we chose. But should seems heavier than what I would like.
CEO Given.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hall. I think these items, so the committee is saying the municipality should. Council is the municipality, and so I think you get to decide if we should or we should not, or if we will or we will not. And so another way to address this, rather than dealing with should versus some other word there, is council could direct administration to provide flower planters. And that's very clear. Council said, do provide flower planters, and administration will go and do that. The same for developing a set of template designs. Council tells me and administration, council direct administration to develop a set of template designs. That's pretty clear. And I think that that was the intent of the committee, was to raise this with council, so there's some clear direction on whether or not to do it. You're hearing should, because I think the committee is giving advice to council. And now it's up to council whether you take that advice, whether you hear that advice and on consideration decide not to follow it, so it's, I think you can give administration more clarity and, and the community. So are there going to be flower planters used? Is there going to be a municipal asset used to provide barriers in 2023? Is it up to me? Is it up to the director of operations? Is it up to the municipal enforcement manager? And I think the committee is saying the municipality should do this, and it's up to council to decide whether you want to dedicate that resource or not, or direct administration to return to a future committee, the whole meeting with a decision on whether or not, or cost implications of, or what. But I think the reason that they say should is because the committee is giving advice to council, and that's up to council to make the decision on those points.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any other comments, questions from council? Councillor Kelleher MP.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall, through you, Mr. Given. Do we have enough planters, or would we have to buy some?
We discussed this when the committee was meeting, and the administration believes we have enough planters.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mayor Ireland, do you want to follow up?
If it is semantics only, I could be persuaded to withdraw the motion, but how do other councillors view this? If we otherwise accept the recommendations and pass them forward, I think the community might be entitled to think that we have in fact provided some sort of direction to administration that they should be doing those things, that they should be providing flower planters, or that they should be developing a set of template designs. And I simply don't think we're there yet. So I had hoped, rather than excise those things from the recommendations, to try and make it a little more clear that the jury's still out. And I think we should consider seriously, and the question that Councillor Kelleher MP asked is good. Are there enough Jersey barriers to go around? I raised last week whether, if we start providing the protective barriers for business, what does that do for our own liability if they turn out to be insufficient? It's a concern that I have, so I don't want to commit to it yet. But that's where I am at with it, and that is, I think we still have the open question about whether or not we're going to do it in either case. But if we say we should, and we accept that as a recommendation and pass it on to a third party, it sounds like a bit of a commitment, even though it's not a shall.
Councillor Wilson, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm okay with the change to May, but I do feel strongly that we should direct administration to provide the planters. The task force came up with the planters because they felt it was a safe alternative to Jersey barriers. And maybe we need that confirmation, or yes, we need that confirmation from administration. So it may makes me feel more comfortable. I'm okay with that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other comments, questions from council? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. I guess through you to Mr. Gibbon, we mentioned specifically Connaught Drive. Any reason that we wouldn't have included Patricia Street? And given the fact that we have enough planters, would we have enough to also add the planters to Patricia Street?
Deputy Mayor Hall for Councillor Alec. The reason that Patricia Street was excluded is because it tends to be a lower speed zone. Vehicles, particularly during peak periods, tend to travel quite slow because it's quite congested with parking on both sides and people coming in and out of parking spaces. So I think the view was that there was a need to have them. The need wasn't as great as on Connaught, where there are 2 lanes of traffic and no parking on one side of that on the left-hand side lane, and so vehicles can tend to travel faster, and that's where there's the greatest area of risk. I don't know that the municipality has enough flower planters to be able to provide them on both Connaught and Patricia.
Councillor Kelleher-MP.
I think if we're going to provide them, they should be provided for both streets, because when I asked earlier if there was any instance, there was 2 instances on Patricia Street with vehicles backing up. So I have a concern there, and that if we're going to provide the flower boxes, then I think we should do it for everybody, or don't do it at all. Or we say, okay, we'll provide them, but the businesses have to pay for them. But I think it's very important that what we do on Connaught is what we do on Patricia Street, because I don't like when we hear traffic is traveling fast. The town is at 30 kilometers an hour, so everybody should be either going 30 or below. So it should be safe.
Thank you for that. Councillor Waxer.
As someone who has a real belief in the power of words, reading that piece makes me uncomfortable just when it talks about flower planters. It doesn't really indicate that we have a picture in our own minds as to what that means, but in the public side, it could mean a bunch of flower pots on a spindly metal frame. I think that, I wondered about changing it to something that concrete planters for the use at the end of installations facing the direction of oncoming traffic are mandatory. The municipality may provide flower planters. I just feel like that speaks to our intent to provide for safety more than what we're saying at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Any other comments, questions from council? There is still a motion on the table. I wonder if it would be friendly amendments or. I might just call the question. I will call the question. Do you want to read it one more time, just for the sake of myself and our viewers?
My motion is with respect to the item on jersey barriers and the item on additional considerations related to template designs, that in each case, the word shall be replaced with the word may.
Councillor Kelleher-MP.
Mayor Arlen, would you accept a friendly amendment that MRJ may provide flower planters with the use at the end of installation facing the direction of oncoming traffic on Canal Drive and Patricia Street?
Thank you, Councillor Keller. Mayor Ireland.
Would you be happy if that's it, and or? Sure. I will accept that, and I think it's still the same, and I thought that because it's May, we may do it on Canal, we may do it somewhere else, derivatives, but I don't think it changes the intent of the motion. So I'm happy to accept that as a friendly amendment.
With the addition of and or Patricia Street. Great. Okay, I will call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed, and that motion is carried. Am I handing the chair back to you now?
I am motioned out.
Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. Are there any other motions to be made with respect to the proposed standards? And the recommendation is that we approve proposed standards, which would mean that we would then pass those on to Parks Canada. So are there any other changes that any councillor is interested in making? If there is not, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion that council approve the proposed standards for patio seating recommended by the commercial use of public space task force as amended? Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any debate on that motion? Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to it? No debate. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Takes us to agenda item 7, notices of motion, of which there are none so far as I am aware. So, councillor reports. Councillor Keller-Rampy.
Last Thursday, December 15th, I attended an Evergreen board meeting through Zoom. We were working on the Victor Lake project near Grand Cache. On Friday, December 16th, I attended the Rural Renewal Committee, which is the committee set up for immigration and to work with employers in Jasper. The application, the framework for employers is just about ready, and the applications will be on the employment website and come January 2nd. So then it'll be open for employers to put in their application to be approved to become an employer of choice, to help them bring in permanent workers into Jasper. So the way the program works is that if you're approved employer of choice of Jasper, you can put in an application, and then if you can recommend, if you meet all the requirements for an employee that's here on a visa or has wants to apply to come into Canada, but they would work in Jasper, it's like a temporary PR, so permanent resident. So what will happen is that if you have, say, somebody on a visa and they want to stay, you can offer them a job, provided of course that you offer it's 30 hours a week. It's on a permanent basis, and if they get approved by the Alberta government, then that goes to the federal government. If they're approved for that position, then they will have to spend 2 years in Jasper. They can change employers, but their permanent residency is based that they will work in Jasper for 2 years. And that will add to our workforce. I just want to add, I did have the great pleasure on Saturday night going with our seniors from Alpine Summit. And we did a tour of the town for the lights. And I have to say, Jasper has done a great job with all the lights.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Granby. Other reports? Councillor Wilson.
I have a JCHC board meeting coming up on Thursday. We will discuss the housing coordinator position and the job description. And yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Last Wednesday, I attended a library board meeting, and great news at the library, a part-time position was filled, which is fantastic. And From the Stacks, which is an adult short story and conversation, which is led by Linda Morgan, is back in full force and seeing a lot of attendance. January, it's on the 5th or the 19th at 1:30. And the last half of our meeting was discussing the wine and cheese we had last night, which was very well attended, probably about 40 people. Councillor Melnick, would you say maybe 40 to 50? I ate a lot of cheese. It was wonderful. And that's all.
Thank you. Other reports? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the 13th of December, I attended the board meeting of the Jasper Yellowhead Historical Society, and they're in the final stages of the acquisition of the Sherman Wildlife Collection at that point. Also, just an event coming up in August of 2023, the Society is promoting the 60th anniversary of the Society with a homecoming event, which will run from a Sunday through a Tuesday with a dinner opportunity for people to gather on the Tuesday, of which there are some 80 already registrants for that event to come back to Jasper. And just if I had not mentioned it publicly, this is the last week of the current manager, Rob Hubick, unfortunately has resigned to take a job in Deerhurst in the Muskoka area. And it is unfortunate for us to be losing him and his wife Rose from the community. And the museum is actively looking for a replacement manager at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I will just report briefly. Of course, as you are all aware, we met with Andrew Campbell of Parks Canada on December 8th to sign the terms of reference for continuing discussions with respect to transfer of administrative responsibilities for land use planning and development from the federal government to the municipality. So Mr. Given remains primarily responsible on that file, and that work will continue. December 9th, I had an opportunity to join the Jasper Volunteer Fire Brigade at its Christmas function and speak to them. On the 14th, we had our ongoing meetings with our consultant, New West Public Affairs and Banff and Canmore concerning our initiative in that regard. On the 14th also, myself and councillors Waxer and Melnick met as the Emergency Advisory Committee. On the 15th, I was invited to and attended with the Board of Directors of the Jasper Destination Marketing Corporation to give them an update with respect to the status of our initiative with Banff and Canmore, targeted at the provincial government and our attempts to secure, firstly, designation for our tourism-based communities, and secondly, funding to go along with that. So they are more or less up to speed on that. And on the 16th, I attended what I think is going to be the last meeting of the steering committee for the tourism master plan. So that is something spearheaded primarily by Tourism Jasper. Mr. Gibbon and I have both been members of that steering committee, and I have to compliment Mr. Jackson at Tourism Jasper. He's done a good job convening us and directing us through a fairly long process. I think we might have been a bit of a frustration to the consultants at times, but they persevered. And I think that the document that is now going to be developed with guidance from the steering committee, which will come back eventually for review, is going to be an excellent document. So that is how I've been spending my time for the last 12 days or so. If there are no other reports, upcoming events, as I said, this is our last meeting of the year. We have an intergovernmental meeting scheduled with Parks Canada on January 17th at 9:30 in the morning at the Parks Canada lower boardroom. And we have our own strategic plan review scheduled for January 24th to 26th in Belmont. So hopefully everybody's already made those necessary arrangements. Are there any other items which ought to be brought to the attention of council? I don't have the dates, but Jasper in January will commence sometime in January, I presume. Anyway, that will be on a future agenda before it arrives, I'm sure. And if there is nothing else, I would welcome a motion that there be no further business. The regular meeting of December 20th, 2022 be adjourned at 3:16. Councillor Keller-Hanthy, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you to those members of the public and to staff who may have been watching online. As I indicated twice earlier, this is our last meeting of the year, so Merry Christmas to all, and we will see you all again in 2023.